basically the thing that's preventing them from picking up. So it's just how we know it's going to come up. Time.
Should I get up there too? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Great.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Congregation Tifereth Israel. My name is Hillel Skolnick, and I'm the senior rabbi here at Congregation Tifereth Israel. I also have the honor and privilege of serving as one of the co-presidents of the B.R.E.A.D organization.
Greetings, I'm Vince Ford, Senior Minister of the Church of Christ at Genesee Avenue, that meets at Genesee Avenue, and I serve as the other co-president of the B.R.E.A.D organization.
We are glad that B.R.E.A.D, the Central Ohio Labor Council, the Columbus Education Association, and the Columbus Education Justice Coalition could put this event together. The housing crisis in our community is worsening, with thousands of residents struggling to afford a safe, decent place to call home. This is especially difficult for our neighbors who earn $30,000 a year or less. Our community has a unique opportunity to make a significant investment into affordable housing from the funds that Columbus and Franklin County received from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. The dollars must be allocated by the end of 2024, so we must act now.
Yes, Rabbi Skolnick. Columbus and Franklin County received over $440 million. You are investing 1/3 of that money in affordable housing solutions for families is crucial. There are members of my congregation who are homeless or struggle to afford housing. In some cases, we've learned that once people do find a place that is affordable, it is in a healthy place for them to live. So at this time, we're going to hear some stories from these individuals about that in just a second. So I'm going to turn things over to Jacqueline Gonzalez to share her story, and then we will have Jasper Mason from Mary Haven to share about the experiences, clients.
Good morning. My experience comes from in 2020, right during the pandemic, I had a Section 8 voucher. Not only that, I was an employee at as a counselor for drug and alcohol. I was a case manager. Once I got the job, my rent went up, which I didn't mind because I'm working. And I figured, well, that if I got to pay $850 a month, I might as well buy me a home. So I started searching, and I found that Metropolitan Housing had a program that would allow you to buy a home if you qualified and you did everything you were supposed to do to get the funding. You would become basically your own property manager. So I went into the program, and then I got canceled. And I lost my job. And I was in the program still going through doing everything I was supposed to do. I finally found a home that they said I could afford under the program. I was allotted $80,000. And of course, you know, $80,000 isn't much to buy a home, but I found one. Went through the process of closing. Was supposed to close on the 15th of September. So I put in my application, all the procedures to move out of where I was at. I had to give a 30-day notice, and I had to actually pay this man to get out of the lease. And here I am, truck loaded, ready to go. And there was no deed. The realtor could not get the deed to the home. So here I am, truckloaded, nowhere to go. This man to put a for sale sign outside while I'm sitting there, nowhere to go. The tenant, the landowner, gave me permission to move in because they were going to get it worked out and I would get the deed. I said, okay, so I moved in, I paid the utilities. After 3 months, it wasn't moving. And I said, well, I can't go anywhere. I can't stay here. I want to stay in the program so I can get by me a home. So, and I did do repairs in that house that I could not get. I had to fix the toilet and do some plumbing. Of course, like I said, I had lost my job and I was in cancer recovery. So I moved into Capitol Park, the Columbus Park Apartments. That was temporary. I got in there quick, which is what I needed. I couldn't be homeless and I wanted to pack in the program. Well, that apartment was not suitable for my living conditions. Not only was it suitable for my medical conditions, it was roach infested. It was rat infested. And then there was a plumbing problem where the plumbing would leak from upstairs. And I called numerous times for them to fix it. I also called Metropolitan Housing so they could come in and do inspections. And they asked to please fix this. And they come in and they do some little work and they temporary fix. One day I went in the bathroom and there were mushrooms growing. They called them eat mushrooms because I looked it up. There was moisture in the walls. I guess from the leak upstairs. They Metropolitan Housing finally said, okay, you have to come in and fix this. So they would come in and fix it and again, and little mushrooms would grow again. Well, I'm still looking for a house. I'm back in the program and I'm looking for a home. This time I have $110,000 loan. But finding a home was not easy. Everywhere I looked, I either got outbid or the homes that I could afford were not suitable for living. Finally, I was ready to give up looking for a home and I didn't know what to do. I knew I couldn't stay in that apartment. One day I went to this one house and I'm just looking at it. And the owner drove up and I told him my story. And he said he wanted me to have the house. And I'm in it right now. Even though there was a lot of, by me being a drug counselor, I have worked with clients and I hear their stories. And here I was, one of their stories. So affordable housing and funding is very important. Not only do we need affordable homes, they need to be decent and livable for everyone. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jasper Mason. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I work at Mary Haven, and my population is persons with substance use disorder and comorbid mental illness. I'm going to provide an example of how lack of access to housing has significant consequences for this population. The patient in question is someone that I have been seeing as an outpatient and had been abstinent from opioid use for close to 2 years. She had been attending appointments regularly and was stable. Then she stopped showing up and I wasn't able to get a hold of her for months. Eventually she reemerges after having been admitted to Mary Haven Addiction Stabilization Center, a detox center that Mary Haven operates on South 5th Street. Around the time that I lost contact with her, the owner of the house that she rented, entered into the eviction process suddenly, despite my patient having been current on her rent. Apparently, the owner wanted to sell the property. My patient did not have access to money for first and last month's rent for a new property or enough time to find a home and therefore enter the shelter system. It's worth mentioning that I have been treating her for PTSD, depression, and insomnia, which were in remission around the time I lost contact with her. This is the first pain point regarding health and housing. Being homeless typically brings with it significant feelings of stress, shame, and concerns about safety, which will exacerbate pre-existing mental health symptoms or lead to their genesis where none exist. Not having a home brings with it fears around one's safety, having one's few possessions stolen, and uncertainty about the future. In the case of this patient, she experienced a profound resurgence of her post-traumatic stress symptoms and her insomnia. But she does her best during this time, leaning heavily on her anxiety and sleep medications, but at some point, the backpack containing them is stolen. This is the second pain point regarding health and housing, access, and difficulty managing chronic conditions. Homeless patients who enter detox have almost always been out of their mental health without access to her medication. She enters full psychiatric decompensation, profound anxious rumination, racing thoughts, panic attacks, and insomnia. When she is able to sleep, she has severe nightmares that prevent any of it from being restful. She returns to the one thing that made her anxiety worse: opioids. My patient breaks her sobriety and returns to injecting fentanyl. Thankfully, she doesn't overdose, but she does begin to develop a temperature, bad headache, shortness of breath, and fatigue when doing normal activities. Eventually, she admits herself to an emergency room and is diagnosed with endocarditis, which they are thankfully able to treat, but by the time she's been discharged and enters detox, the damage has been done. She has a lowered ejection fraction and is in the early stages of heart failure, which she'll have to manage for the rest of her life. All of this, all of it, could have been prevented if she had access to stable housing or was able to. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Amelia Robinson from the Columbus Dispatch. I want to thank you guys for coming out today. And I just want to especially thank Jasper Mason and Jacqueline Gonzalez for sharing those really powerful stories about people who live in our community, and hopefully we can get some answers so that we can go forward with solutions. I want to bring to the stage Anthony Fortney, who is going to talk about the obstacles and opportunities that there may be for Columbus.
Good morning to all.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson. Good morning, Maria. To all of you that have taken time out of your schedules to come and to participate this morning, I want you to know that you are a very special audience, not just because you are members of B.R.E.A.D and B.R.E.A.D congregations, but you are now a captive audience. Now, every preacher and every pastor knows what that means. That means you can't get out of here without raising your finger, tipping out, or otherwise excusing yourself. But while you're here, you're going to hear some information. I was asked, I represent the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, formerly, and most people call it HUD. HUD has 9 different divisions, but most people only understand the one that typically deals with your local metropolitan housing authority. And the housing authorities of every community we have across the state is simply a partner of HUD. It's one of our many partners of HUD. So sometimes my job is just to help people orient themselves that when you deal with your local housing authority, you're dealing with just one small fraction of what HUD is all about and what HUD does. And so HUD services affects 3 out of 4 households across the state of Ohio. That is, HUD programs and activities goes all the way from the single family FHA programs all the way down to homeless programs. And so the whole spectrum of households, typically either with a single family mortgage or a multifamily complex that they live in, or a healthcare facility that they may have a convalescence or hopefully a short-term stay in, all the way down to, again, those that are permanently housed and those that are homeless, whether it's literal or imminently homeless. Then HUD has programs that serves the entire gamut of individuals across the state of Ohio for opportunities. And I'm sure you're going to hear numbers. I'm one of those people that we have the numbers. I don't always like to throw out numbers because numbers sometimes don't relate to the full story of what people are dealing with. And so as you've heard the 2 prior speakers identify, they're identifying what housing means to individuals. So aside from the numbers, if you're not stably housed, then your life, your health, your education, your wealth, your quality of life is going to be diminished. As you may hear some of the numbers, and again, there's numbers coming from a lot of different statistics and a lot of different sources, but as a captive audience, if you're going to be focused on housing, then you'll hear a lot of information about housing. You'll hear that there is probably 500,000 less housing units available in this marketplace than there are households that need stable, affordable housing. That's 500,000 less than what is needed, and particularly in comparison to other markets around the country. When we deal with the most vulnerable, if you would, then some numbers that you can take in consideration. There's approximately 550,000 households in the central Ohio area. That's the metropolitan statistical area. 550,000 households. For those households, approximately 55% of them earn less than 80% of the area median income. Okay, so about 55,000, which is approximately 307,000 households earn less than median income of this area. Median income is about $75,000 for this Columbus MSA. Okay. For those individuals, and you've heard some of the stories just now, they can't find an affordable housing unit to either rent or to buy because there's not enough of them in the marketplace. You dig a little deeper, then you have the hardest to serve, which is the individuals with the lowest level. And that is less than 50% of the area median income, individuals that earn less than $45,000. We have 187,000 households in this MSA that earns less than $45,000. What can you rent at that level of income? So when it comes to the opportunities and the obstacles, then we have an inverse model that there's not enough affordable housing units, whether it's multifamily, single family living units available for the households that are the hardest to serve with the lowest income. The Franklin County area, and I'll just give these 2 numbers, sit down. HUD invests directly with about 5 different programs that we fund the units of local government across the state and the state of Ohio, but particularly in this local area. For Franklin County, in the last 2 years, we've given about $7 million that we've given in our programs that we call our community planning and development programs. For FY21, we have provided them with $3,156,000 just for a new housing program called the Home ARP. home ARP. ARPA, as most people know it, home because it's a special allocation of dollars. In other words, we've given them as much as 1 full year as extra money. And that's a program that the money is available, the plan is just now being written. For the city of Columbus, we've given them approximately $15 million per year, 15 for 1 year, 15, 8 in the second year, but 16 million for the ARPA program. And again, I'm just mentioning this one because our collection of funds that we bring into the community, they use in a lot of different ways. And all of you know your local government, you know how to access your local government officials, but in this instance, we've given them $16 million in the home ARPA program. That is money that is just now in the planning stages. For our homeless programs, we've given $19 million, 18 million in 2021. And these are funds, again, that helps the lowest and the most vulnerable. I say that this is a time representing the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that more money has been put on the street in any one fiscal year or time period than the history of the agency, which is over 55 years. Our Secretary, Marcia Fudge, directly here from Ohio, has championed and triumphed the call for affordable housing all over this country. Our local representatives, our Congress individuals that are from this area have continued to rally around the need for money for affordable housing. Everything from cash to vouchers. This is the time for this captive audience to be at the table and to ensure that there is equity and diversity in the level of housing that we have, because for the first time ever, there's money available to make a difference. With that, I thank you for your attention. Our office has materials on the table out on the side that will give you information about our different programs, as well as how to contact us. HUD is pleased to be at the table because housing is our name. We're there and we're looking to make a difference. Enjoy your day.
Thank you for coming and talking to this campus audience. We are passionate about this issue, obviously. Thank you for sharing what HUD is doing. Next, we're going to bring to the stage a person that you guys might know already, Mark Fluhart, who is from the Fluhart. Thank you. I was getting to the Hardy part. They kind of cut me off. From the Central Ohio Labor Council, going to talk to us about.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Yes, in the labor movement, we're all brothers and sisters. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mark Fluharty. I'm the Executive Director of the Central Ohio Labor Council, AFL-CIO, that represents over 85,000 men and women here in our community. I get the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker. But before I do, just a couple things. One, first, I'd like to personally thank all of the elected officials that took the time to come today and hear this important discussion. You may tell by my accent that yes, I am a transplanted hillbilly. I moved from Appalachia to Central Ohio in 1987. When I moved to Central Ohio, I was homeless. I got a job making $6 per hour, $12,840 per year. With that job, I was able to afford a nice apartment in the North End. I then became a union meat cutter. For those, I am a meat cutter by trade. I worked for Meyer before I went to work for the United Food and Commercial Workers, the union representing the workers in retail here in Central Ohio. Shop, Kroger, Meyer, CVS. Today, that would be $36,000. And we're here talking about a cutoff of $30,000, right? So 30 6 years later, I still wouldn't be able to afford an apartment if my wages had kept up. I'm happy that the governor has announced a $400 million initiative, $100 million per year for the next 4 years for affordable housing. I hope to God it makes it through the state budget. But with my union job, I was able to get a nicer apartment, and eventually that led to home ownership, a privilege denied to many, which is why I'm so passionate about affordable housing. Jesus said, we will always have the poor. It's our job to do something about it, take care of it. Victoria Bourret joined the NLIHC staff in January 2018 as a housing advocacy organizer and transitioned to the erase coordinator position at the beginning of 2022. As the erase coordinator, Tori works with the erase team to advance the coalition's mission and ensure that the historic emergency rental assistance appropriated by Congress reaches the lowest level income and most marginalized renters it is intended for. As a housing advocacy organizer, Tori mobilized and activated the field around the coalition's policy priorities, supervised social work interns, and managed the state partner network. Sounds like a labor. Among other activities, prior to joining the NLIHC, Tori served as communications and project manager at the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania, a state partner of the NLIHC. She also served 2 terms in AmeriCorps, one with AmeriCorps NCCC in Denver, Colorado, and one with Public Allies in Delaware. Tori earned her B.A. in Women's Studies and Psychology from the University of Delaware and her MSW from the University of Pennsylvania. Brothers and sisters, Victoria Bourret.
Hi all, thanks so much for having me. As Mark mentioned, I'm Victoria Bourret. I'm with the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and I'm so excited to be with you all today. I'm, like Mark mentioned, the erase coordinator there, and work on ensuring that the emergency rental assistance money that was passed gets to the lowest income folks. And I'm also working on helping folks pass tenant protection in their local communities, as well as making sure that their rental assistance money becomes permanent programs in places throughout the country. So just a little bit about the National Low Income Housing Coalition for those not familiar with us. We're dedicated to achieving racially and socially equitable public policy that ensures people with the lowest incomes have quality homes that are accessible and affordable in communities of their choice. So we really focused on the lowest income folks. So this is a map of the United States, obviously, and this really looks at the number of affordable and available homes in the US. So the red is the most severe housing shortage, and yellow is, dark yellow is a little bit less, but as we see, nowhere in the US is there enough housing for those at the lowest income level, which is extremely low income. So folks making about $30,000 or below. So in Ohio, there's only 43 affordable and available rental homes for every 100 extremely low income renters. And then when we look at the BIPOC community, there's only 20% of Black households that are extremely low income renters, 18% of American Indian and Alaska Native households, and 15% of Latino households. They're all extremely low income renters compared to 6% of white households. So this chart basically looks at the cost burden. So we're really focused on the extremely low income folks because those are the folks that have very little wiggle room, as you all know, to afford other costs besides housing. So when we say cost burden, we're talking about people that spend more than 30% of their income on housing. When we say severe cost burden, we are talking about folks that spend 50% of their income or more on housing. So 67% of extremely low income renter households in Ohio are severely cost burdened. So when we think about this, let's look at Columbus, for example. So we have someone that makes $24,000 a year. The fair market rate of housing in Columbus is $1,032. And so when we look at that, they have less than $1,000 to afford all other costs besides housing. If we look at someone who is on Social Security and they make $700 a month, that means that they are spending all of their money and becoming in debt if they are in a fair market apartment. That's really why we need more resources for housing, because the market just doesn't cut it when we talk about the lowest income folks. And so the solution is to fund long-term housing solutions. So when we talk about that, we're talking about 4 buckets. So we're talking about decreasing the gap between incomes and the cost of rent. We're talking about increasing the supply of affordable housing. We're talking about creating a permanent short-term rental assistance fund, and also creating more tenant protections. So when we talk about decreasing the gap between rents and income, we're talking about expanding universal vouchers so that everyone who needs a voucher and would qualify for one gets one. When we're talking about housing supply, we're looking at the Housing Trust Fund, the National Housing Trust Fund, which is the only resource that specifically targets 50% of the area, folks making 50% of the area median income and below. And then we're also talking about public housing. So making sure that the capital backlog is fixed and that folks in public housing have decent quality living arrangements. And then in terms of the rent stabilization fund, we're talking about funding that. There's a bill right now, the Eviction Crisis Act, which is bipartisan and would create a rent stabilization fund for folks in emergency situations. Like Jasper mentioned, really would have helped that person stay in their home and help deal with the eviction proceeding. And so that would be, there's a lot of folks who that applies to where that would be really helpful. And then tenant protections, in order for vouchers to work, we need source of income protections, because a lot of places actually don't even take vouchers, right? So you have a voucher, but you can't even use it. And that's really frustrating. And so that's just one example of tenant protections that we're working for as well. So all of this sets the context for talking about the state and local fiscal recovery funds that were allocated in the American Rescue Plan Act. So far, actually 14 billion of those funds have been used for housing, and 11.7 billion have been used for direct household assistance and affordable housing expansion. 3.2 billion went towards affordable housing development and preservation, and 3 billion to folks experiencing homelessness. So NLIHC also created our own tracker. These numbers that I just mentioned are from the Treasury Department. We created our tracker to look at states and 60 localities' use of these funds. So you're interested in looking at specific examples, that's a really good resource to utilize. So just real briefly, before I talk about examples of Ohio cities that are utilizing this money for affordable housing, as well as other localities in and around the area, just wanted to mention that there was some issues with the funding at first for going towards affordable housing creation. That issue is fixed. Treasury increase the flexibility to use SLFRF to fund long-term affordable housing loans. And then they expanded presumptive eligible program list to include LIHTC, the Low Income Housing Tax Credit, Public Housing Capital Fund, Section 202 and Section 811, public-based rental assistance, and multifamily preservation and revitalization programs. So basically, if your project qualifies for any of those programs, the SLFRF, sorry, the mouthful, that project will also qualify for that. So, and then just a reminder, the funds must be allocated by December 31st, 2024, and expended by December 31st, 2026. So the next slide just shows shows examples of programs or cities in Ohio that are utilizing this money for housing. So the first example is Akron, that's using $20 million for a home repair program. So folks are eligible for up to $25,000 in repairs, going towards people that need it the most. And then $17.5 million is available to community development corporations to support neighborhood projects and affordable housing construction. In Canton, $3.5 million will go to Habitat for Humanity to build and help support the building of 130 homes. Cincinnati dedicated $2.5 million to renovate or construct 40 homes in the area's qualified census tracts, so areas where 50% of households with incomes below 60% AMI or have a poverty rate of 25% or more. East Cleveland dedicated $3.1 million to assist homeowners with a grant of $3,000 for home repairs. And Toledo dedicated $3.8 million to homeowners for repairs, as well as $1.2 million to remove light in their area. So those are just a couple of examples of cities in Ohio utilizing these funds, and all of that is listed. You can go on the Treasury site and they have a list of what all the cities cities, counties, and states that receive this money are doing with the funds. It's a little bit of you have to really search through. It's like thousands and thousands of entries, but that's why our housing project uses. And then here's some other examples in other states. So in Indianapolis, $1.2 million is being used to fund tenant advocate to help folks dealing with eviction. And then $5 million is going to homeless services. In Louisville, $14 million is going right directly into their Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which serves the lowest income folks in their area. And we also have $10 million for a court eviction diversion program. St. Louis, more than $30 million is going towards rapid rehousing, bridge housing, affordable housing creation and preservation, and $5 million actually is being devoted to folks. So they're giving people direct payments of $300 directly into their pockets. And then in Texas, they put nearly $34 million into expanding permanent supportive housing solutions, which is a housing first model. So helping people experiencing homelessness go directly into housing. And then this is just some recommendations for uses. Again, just prioritizing the lowest income folks, using a data-driven approach. So figuring out what the conducting needs assessment and focus groups and figuring out what the needs in the specific community are. Not all approaches fit all communities. So really making sure that communities are at the table and representing the needs of people that are dealing directly with these issues, as well as the folks dealing with these issues are at the table as well, because hearing their voices is very, very, very important. We need to prioritize housing first programs. So again, those are research-based effective solutions to ensuring that folks experiencing homelessness can get into housing, supporting underhoused individuals from marginalized communities. We could also use the money to maintain and expand eviction prevention infrastructure, which was created during the pandemic. fund right to counsel and other eviction diversion programs, so people have representation in eviction court. So about 95% of landlords have representation compared to about 10% of tenants. So the gap is really, really big. Again, decreasing that gap, increasing the supply of affordable housing for the lowest income, prioritizing projects that are long-term affordability, and also projects that are led by nonprofit organizations that are mission-driven and focused on building housing for the lowest income people, and then affirmatively furthering fair housing. So really trying to target segregated communities and desegregate cities and localities and communities with this funding. So that is it. Thanks so much for listening, and happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Thanks for sharing that information, Tori. I really appreciate it. Just wanted to say real quick that if you have questions for Tori, and I'm sure you all do, write them down in the note cards you were given. I already have one note card already. So we're gonna take a couple minutes for you to do that. And if volunteers are in the room, can you wave your hands like you just don't care so people know who you are? And those are people who you would give the cards to. First though, I want to recognize all the city and county officials who are in the room. So if you're from the city or the county, can you please stand up and be acknowledged? So we're going to start getting to the questions in just a few minutes. Volunteers are bringing them up. First, though, I'm going to talk to Tori. I got a couple questions of my own. See if I can move this around. I guess one of the things that you were talking about, I've looked for a house in Columbus, and I can't find a house either. Why do you think it's best to kind of focus on folks who are, on the lower end of the economic scale?
Yeah, I think that's really important to focus on extremely low income renters, because the market really doesn't cover those folks. And actually, if we were able to provide housing for the lowest income folks, that would make the homes that they are in right now, where they're severely cost burdened, actually available to the people in the higher income categories, so that they wouldn't be cost burdened. So basically, it's like trickle up. We kind of think about it. So let's meet the people with the biggest needs, and then the housing that they're in, like I mentioned, is available to folks in higher incomes. So that's a little bit of our kind of reasoning around that.
So how does Ohio compare to other states when it comes to using these funds? These housing, I can't say the acronym for it. Is it FISLA or FIF?
Yeah, it's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. So actually, a lot of states have already appropriated money. So I think we're about 90%, 80 or 90% have been appropriated so far. And Ohio, I think, is on the slower end of that. So a lot of states are prioritizing housing and are, really focused on putting hundreds of millions of dollars for housing, whereas Ohio, again, is on the lower end of that. So I think it's really, folks are seeing the need, especially during the pandemic, to provide housing, especially because housing is health, and housing really applies to all aspects of people's lives. So it's great to see that priority. And I think, Ohio is to get there, hopefully.
So I know you know expert on Columbus, obviously, but you've done some research for this presentation. Generally, you have done your research. Are there things that cities Columbus size have done that you think should be attempted here?
Yeah, so a lot of the different cities I highlighted in the presentation actually were around 1 million to 2 million population size, and I know Columbus is around that. So a lot of it is, yeah, I mean, those cities, some of them spent 20, 30, $40 million on putting money into trust funds, on ensuring folks experiencing homelessness have safe and accessible housing, on addiction prevention and making sure people have legal assistance. So yeah, there's a lot of cities that are Columbus's size that are doing and really prioritizing housing and being able to pass that. So.
Really quick, like technical question. Will your slides be available anywhere for folks who want to look at them?
Yes, I think we can definitely make those. I think Fred can send those out to folks who attended because I have a lot of great links on there. So hopefully, I think those should be available.
And can you tell what percentage of affordable housing is not livable or safe? When we talk about affordable housing, obviously a lot of these places are not up to par and are not safe.
So that's a great question, and actually one that is we don't have a good answer to. So the American Census Bureau has asked 1 or 2 questions on habitability, and that doesn't really give us enough detail or information to make that judgment. So that's why we actually leave it out of our numbers, because we can't really tell from what's available through the census.
And see, I don't know if this is actually a question for you or not, but I think you may be able to answer it in a different way. The questioner wants to know what programs does Columbus have in place to address people making $30,000 or less? I don't know if you would know that particularly, but do you know of programs around the country that will fit that?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's available in Columbus. But I do know that Section 8, I don't know what the waiting list here is like for Section 8. I know it's really high in lots of places across the country. But Section 8 vouchers are one form of rental assistance for folks, as well as the emergency rental assistance. I'm not sure what Columbus's use of those funds have looked like and if they have any left, but some cities and localities still have that funding available. And as well as other HUD housing programs, which was mentioned earlier.
Okay, do municipalities of all sizes qualify for SLFRF funds?
That's a great question. Yeah, so there was specific tranches given to communities, and I think they had to meet a specific population point, but I can look into that further.
And when we talk about veterans, are there certain things that you see cities doing right when it comes to veteran population?
Yeah, I think permanent supportive housing is a really great resource for veterans, especially experiencing homelessness. And I think a lot of the housing trust fund and affordable housing can apply to folks who are veterans as well.
So is there a recommendation that you might have on how much a city should invest and what strategy has the greatest impact?
Okay. Yeah, we really push housing trust funds as a great resource because they are geared toward the lowest income folks. We also support making sure that there's vouchers for everybody. A lot of tenant protections are being passed in localities right now, which are really helping folks to be represented in housing court. And of course, source of income protections is really important for folks to use vouchers. So those are just a couple suggestions, but like I said, every community is different. And so the needs of Columbus might be different from, for example, the needs of Nashville or whatnot. So that really comes down to you all to help gather information and figure out what works best for your community.
So this is a landlord question. Are there any progressive landlord groups that are engaged in developing solutions?
That is a great question. I cannot think of any. I know that some apartment associations have worked with housing advocates and housing coalitions on certain legislation. But in terms of specific groups, I can't really think of any at the moment.
How is NLIHC working with other organizations to increase income through measures like the earned income tax credit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually have our Opportunity Starts at Home campaign, which works with various sectors, including health, human services, education, labor, environmental science, LGBTQ+ community. So that group is really working on really breaking through the sectors and having folks work together on housing solutions. And we do support the earned income tax credit, as well as the child tax credit and other solutions to help lessen the poverty gap as well.
It's kind of a question I have for you. So obviously, affordable housing is a problem all over the country. Certainly here in Columbus, there's a lot of groups working on it, including B.R.E.A.D. How do you think we compare to other cities of our size in terms of the problem? And obviously right now people are worried about the future and what things are going to look like we have the Intel plan and some other growth coming. So how do we look?
That's a good question. I would say that that's one question that I can't answer without really digging more into the research. But
you don't have the solution for the biggest question of in the city. Sorry, of course.
I will say though, of course, there is, like I mentioned earlier, there is nowhere is there enough affordable housing, and Columbus is like in the middle, I would say in the middle in terms of other locations, and the housing shortage.
I know it feels very hard when you live in it. When you look at other places, you always kind of wonder how
it's hard to compare. Yeah.
So affordable housing is already a challenge in our suburbs. Do you still advocate for these types of communities to focus on the lowest income groups? And if so, what advice would you give advocates working in suburbs to achieve this?
Yeah, definitely. It's applicable, everywhere. In rural, suburban, and urban communities, there is a shortage. And oftentimes, depending on the area, but multifamily units can work, but also people have been doing affordable single family units or 1 to 4 units. So sometimes those work better in suburban communities. Vouchers can be utilized anywhere though. And so those are just a couple of suggestions. But
so when it comes to not in my backyard NIMBYism,
yeah.
Obviously people want affordable housing, but they don't want it in their backyards. How should advocates and people in general kind of work beyond that? Or, do you have any answers to that or ideas?
Yeah, I would say the myth of multifamily housing and affordable housing bringing down housing costs is exactly that, a myth. And that actually, if we invest in communities, if we invest in housing in communities, that can really bring up the community itself. And that, I think also thinking of housing as a right, as a human right, and that everyone deserves a roof over their head, and their basic needs met, I think is one way of looking at that as well.
And that human aspect is always going to be there. How can funds be vetted to school districts who have programming for homeless students and families? I think you're speaking of the federal funds.
Yeah, I don't know. We tend to focus mostly on housing issues, so I can't speak to that question, but that's a great one.
This is another question, I think along those same lines. Are there any plans to allocate funds for ADA physical accessibility housing for those with physical disabilities?
Yeah, that's also another great question that I am not familiar with in terms of the intent for that in Columbus. But disabilities is a huge issue, especially in the affordable housing community. And there needs to be more resources made available to those folks.
Okay, so how is NLIHC working to remove barriers related to background check?
Yeah, so we definitely advocate. We're working with a coalition with equal justice organizations and the criminal justice community, and we're really working on, we support legislation around removing background checks and at the federal level and also at the state and local level.
Okay. So you have given examples of cities that have allocated as much as $40 million. Local advocates in Columbus and Franklin County are asking for a much larger investment of ARPA funds with the bulk going to our affordable housing trust fund, given our extreme housing needs for very low income people, are we local advocates being unreasonable or being leaders in the nation and doing the right thing?
Yeah, you are definitely not being unreasonable. The need is huge and you need more funding and resources to really address and make a dent in the need here. So, and I will say, I just focused on the areas that were similar to y'all in size and in more red states, but I mean, there's been billions, some states have dedicated billions of money to affordable housing, other hundreds of millions. So I would really recommend checking out our resource on our site that lists every single, like I mentioned, 60 localities and all 50 states and Puerto Rico. So you can really see what folks have really focused on. But yeah, 100+ billion for housing is excellent. And like I mentioned, you guys should really push that.
So Tori, based on the questions you got, have you any other thoughts that you might want to share with folks? We got 2 more.
Thank you. You guys have great questions. Really appreciate it.
Go ahead. You got any other questions?
No, I mean, these questions have been really great. I can't think of any gaps that are missing.
I think this question is basically the same about background checks that have been expunged. Pretty much the same as what we asked.
And I will say on expungement and eviction ceiling. So I mentioned a little bit, but the group that I work with, so I am an emergency rental assistant. Like I mentioned, I had been doing work around that, and now we're kind of pivoting to be working on tenant protection as well as ensuring that these programs stay permanent. But on the rental or tenant protection side, we are working on expungement, sealing, and we're putting out a toolkit that should be released in the next month or so that really details states that are working on this issue, what the laws look like, and really making it pretty comprehensive so people can use that as a tool to then implement that in their communities. And we're also, we're also working on a national, federal tenant bill of rights, and we're working with a couple of coalitions on that. That's going to be including a lot of the questions you'll ask, a lot of tenant protections on, eviction ceiling and source of income protections and whatnot. So it's a very extensive, comprehensive list, and that should be coming out within the next couple of months or so as well.
Okay, so like this person has a question about tiny houses. I don't think you maybe know about this program, but they're speaking of a program that people lived in tiny houses for 3 years maximum as they were trained to become able to make a decent living. And it says, is that a plan that can continue and get bigger? I don't know if you know about that plan, but what part do tiny houses play in this problem?
Yeah, I know some of these funds have been used for tiny homes. I think in Denver, they've used some of the state and local fiscal recovery funds for tiny homes. I will say that we're focused on more permanent solutions for affordable housing. So structures that last, you're dedicating federal resources. We think that, that should be used for long-term investments for affordable housing.
I want to thank you. I think we have some more questions coming, but I want to thank you for playing 3,000 questions about housing. So you're doing a great job. You have more questions? Huh? Okay, so we're going to bring Stuart up to the table or the stage. Stuart.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stuart McIntyre, steering committee member of the Columbus Education Justice Coalition, one of the co-conveners of this event. But before I get into our next steps, which is my charge, can we please get a round of applause for all of our speakers, for our wonderful moderator, for all of our co-conveners, and also for all the volunteers that made this. Something that I've learned over the years is that usually behind any successful event, there's a bunch of women doing a bunch of work. So many of you asked questions that were specific to our city and county officials. We, are not able to answer those today. We have all those questions. We will be posting them in a frequently asked questions website. Is that right? And we also, we did ask our city and county officials to stand and ask questions, but they were unable to do so. So that may be something that you want to take up with them. So to get to our next steps, I hope that you all were inspired by what you heard today. We know that so many of you here are dedicated to resolving our affordable housing crisis. And this work is going to be important and ongoing. It's not going to be solved with one policy. It's not going to be solved in 1 year. But today we're focused on this question of what will our city and county do with these American Rescue Plan dollars? And will they invest 1/3 of these dollars in affordable housing solutions for those in the most need? So we can't leave here today without taking some immediate action steps. So one step, if you will direct your gaze to the back of the room, is a banner that we have here. So we're asking everyone present to sign the banner, to share a picture, take your photo, share a picture on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and use the hashtag housing614. So that's hashtag housing614. You may want to write that down. And we encourage you to tag our elected officials, let them know that you'd like them to invest 1/3 of the ARPA dollars into affordable housing. So another action step. So at some point over the next couple of days, we want you to make 2 phone calls. One phone call to our mayor, Andrew Ginther, and another to our Franklin County Commissioner, John O'Grady. We will send you the information with their phone numbers and a draft script, so you don't have to pick it up all on your own. But once again, we're asking you to urge them to allocate 1/3 of these ARPA dollars to affordable housing solutions. And please let them know that you attended today's event. Share some of the things that you heard about what's happening in other states, other cities, other counties across the country. Because we really think that Columbus could be a leader in affordable housing. You saw those numbers up on the screen, $30 or $40 million investments. Why couldn't we do more? Why couldn't we do more? And part of why this is important is because we know that a lot of our elected officials are continuously working on this issue. They're continuously talking about affordable housing. A quote that Mayor Ginther made in his State of the City address last year is, quote, "It comes down to this. If you're making $50,000 a year, you shouldn't be paying more than $1,200 a month to live in the neighborhood of your choice. Affordable housing must be available in every neighborhood." Commissioner O'Grady, quote, "Affordable housing has been one of the greatest challenges facing our community for some time. And what we hear from the leadership of other communities who've been facing this challenge is that they wish they would have begun working on it a long time ago." So again, what we want today is for words to match actions. That's why we're asking you to call the mayor, to call the county commissioner, to sign the banner, take a photo, post it on social media, so that Columbus can be a leader in affordable housing. And we really do appreciate our elected officials for taking the time to be here, to listen to the presentations, to engage their constituents. All right, everyone still with me? So we have 2 more messages from our co-conveners. So first is an announcement from the Columbus Education Justice Coalition, which I'm here today representing. So the Columbus Education Justice Coalition is a new organization. It's a group of community partners, parents, students, caregivers, educators, and individuals who believe in inclusive, culturally responsive, fully funded, equitable public education. And that is what Columbus students deserve. This organization, right now, we see an opportunity. Our entire community, all of our attention and our eyes were on our public schools after the CEA went out on strike. And we want to expand this conversation. We're hosting a listening campaign, the Our City, Our Schools listening campaign. And we encourage all of you to participate. So our campaign has 3 phases: listen, learn, and move. The first phase, listen, is a series of community conversations all across Columbus. So this is something that any individual or organization can sign up to host. We've got some flyers, and my fellow steering committee member, Amanda Erickson, has got the flyers here, and we'll start getting those passed around. On one side of the flyer, there's a QR code that will take you to a link tree where you can sign up to host conversations, learn more about the work of the Columbus Education Justice Coalition and how your organization may be involved. But the thing that I want to highlight is hosting community conversations. These don't have to be formal. They can be casual. You know, I plan on hosting one with my neighbors, just a kind of backyard barbecue. And the purpose of these conversations is to talk about what our vision is for our city schools, what the challenges that we see facing our schools inside of the classroom, but then also the broader social issues and social policy that impacts education so much. And as a result of these conversations, after this listening process, which I encourage all of you to consider participating in, it could be through your church, your community organization, or as individuals. After that, we learn, and we go through the data, we go through the outcomes of these conversations. We determine, what are the biggest priority issues in our community, in our schools, and then we move. And the Columbus Education Justice Coalition, we're an organization that's about action, it's about advocacy, and the community conversation will directly influence our advocacy campaigns. And as many of you are probably aware, we have municipal elections coming up this fall. We have our school board elections coming up this fall. And so we really hope to influence what the conversation is around the school board race. What issues our school board members are attempting to address. So once again, you can find out about this through our flyer. If you get to use your camera to take a picture of the QR code, it'll be right there by Elder Tree. So that concludes that announcement. And last but most definitely not least, B.R.E.A.D is hosting their annual Nehemiah Action on April 25th at 7 p.m. at the State Fairgrounds. This will be an opportunity for local officials to make commitments and announcements on investing ARPA dollars. So once again, thank you all so much for being here. And we really hope that these words and everything that's been talked about today can lead to concrete action on these issues. Thank you.
I just want to second what Stuart said. I hope this does lead to some action that's positive for the community. Thank you also so much for coming out today, and I hope you gained some knowledge and insight that will help you in your advocacy and also in your jobs as people who care about our community. So have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
You were taping that, was that for the Zoom, or are you doing
just
it
a
personally?
recording? Yeah, just a recording.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
There's your phone.
Oh.
You might.
Oh, yeah, I know.